Lawyers, did you ever win your case so much that the opposing lawyer quit or was fired from his job? Sometimes you can just feel that things will go your way. I had this client who was accused by his neighbor that his house was burgled, and the person responsible for it was my client. There wasn't much evidence against my client. There was this fingerprint belonging to my client which on the doorknob. Nevertheless, that could have been easily argued. They are neighbors after all. They do visit each other. However, the more serious issue playing against us were my client's previous convictions. He served time for burglary. So, I knew the judge will not let us off easily. The opposing lawyer was well known for being an expert in burglary cases, and my colleagues at the firm kept making fun of me that I will be schooled, but wasn't intimidated. Everybody needs to lose at least one. The opposing lawyer turned 10 minutes late. He apologized to the judge, blaming his lack of punctuality on the traffic. The judge was dissatisfied with, but allowed the trial to proceed. My opponent went on presenting their case, but making small mistakes along the way, such as mispronouncing names or altering facts about my client's past convictions. This was quickly emphasized by my observations, and the judge agreed with his lack of professionalism. He was running on thin ice now. I could see his client getting more worries as well. He then went on saying what I knew he would say, bringing into discussion my client's fingerprint on the doorknob. This was pretty much the only "reliable piece of evidence against us." I counter-argued it, claiming the commonality of the fingerprint reaching the doorknob given the fact that both individuals are neighbors, swiftly attributing the benefit of the doubt to the whole situation. I expected a quick counter-argument to this given by the opposing lawyer. However, when I looked at him, I saw a blank face, like he wasn't expecting me to respond so well. That kind of surprised me, that he didn't take such response into consideration, as it seemed just common sense. He stuttered a little bit, then he kept on referring again to my client's past convictions, which can imply the fact that my client would be more inclined towards committing such criminal acts. As a response, I raised the issue to the judge, claiming this argument had been overused and that it starts to feel like a discrimination. A man should not be judged on the basis of his past actions. Who he is now does not necessarily represent who he was in the past. The judge upholds my argument and criticized the opposing lawyer for not bringing anything valuable into the trial, appearing unprepared. He forgot to mention outguilt. My client was found not guilty as it was not proven beyond reasonable that he was responsible for the burglary. Happy days. The person accusing my client was obviously not happy with the result. After the trial, I could see the opposing lawyer and his client arguing. He kept saying, "I won't pay you a dime. You completely blew it. I will let all my family friends who were interested in your services know how lousy of a lawyer you are. Maybe I should get in touch with the other lawyer." That was music to my ears. A week later, I have sent my card to him. After that, I signed 3 more clients, which all were recommended by the client I have faced in court. Quite ironic, but oddly satisfying. As for the opposing lawyer, I heard he went back to drunk driving cases. Maybe he was a bit under the influence on that day too. It was the morning of a very important day, and I was worried about being late to court. I had a very big case that day and prepared for it like never before. I was determined to win. I had even taken care of resting well and eating a full breakfast. I got to court in time, put my client up to date regarding what stand are we going to get, and finally, as we were waiting to enter the courtroom, got the chance to check the competition. Surprisingly, only the client was present, nervously making phone calls, trying to keep it all together. You could see clearly, he was panicking. Of course he was guilty, but I already knew that. The whole lawsuit was allegedly about a mix-up of papers regarding an old house. They were fighting over who owns it. Only later I managed to find out in my research that the other side tried to get a hold on it illegally. This is going to be piece of cake. I thought to myself as I was watching the accused visibly panicked and his lawyer nowhere in sight. Few moments later though, he shows up trying to keep a calm face, excusing himself for being late and blaming the traffic. But the signs were clear even from his appearance. His tie a bit loose, his shoes unpolished, and his shirt badly ironed. He had obviously not studied enough and wasn't feeling prepared. He looked like he had a really long night before him. A few minutes pass, and we are told the judge is ready for us. We enter and are allowed a few moments before it all begins. I had only drank a bit of water and tried to quickly recap the whole case in my mind. I could already see the judge settling in his seat and raising his hammer, only he could not finish the action as a loud gasp and a really vulgar curse word was heard across the room. For a few seconds, everybody grew silent, even the judge, but everybody had their attention towards the other side, clearly feeling the tension there. The lawyer and the client stared at each other before anybody could say anything. "What did you just say?" repeated the client a couple of times. "My apologies, sir. I cannot imagine how this happened," I stuttered, the lawyer, already breaking a sweat and all red. "Something wrong, gentlemen?" The judge's deep-toned voice was heard across the room, not implying the happiest attitude. "Excuse us, Your Honor, but my lawyer here apparently did not bother to bring with himself my case file. Therefore I would like to apologize for the interruption and let you know I will be representing myself from now on, if that's okay, Your Honor." Everybody grew even more silent, and the lawyer even more so. Finally realizing what was happening, he quickly and nervously gathered his belongings, not many anyway, and left the courtroom without saying any other word. The judge didn't allow the trial to proceed, considering all this, and rightfully so. I didn't mind that fact. It gave me even more time to prepare, and maybe find new arguments and easier ways for my client to win. A month passed, and I was once again up and ready for this case. Arriving to court, after speaking to my client, I let myself notice that the other side was represented by a new lawyer from another firm. From what could I tell? It didn't matter, I won anyway, and was really proud of how fast I managed to convince the judge that the house was rightfully my client's. Only later did I found out from a paper release that the other lawyer was fired for making such a huge mistake, and about a week later, I saw him come in at an interview at the firm I'm also representing. Poor guy, he's not going to have a new job anytime soon. In the office they used to call it the trial of the year. It was one of my most successful cases ever. Even so much so, that it ended the opposing lawyer's career, not that I have intended to. The client I was representing had slim chances of getting away. He was accused of property damage because he was allegedly drunk. There was no reported CCTV of the accident, nor did the police manage to do any tests to prove that he was intoxicated, because the incident was reported only hours later, and they had to track the car based on the description of the witnesses. Moreover, the witnesses claimed this all happened because my client was drunk. If this proves to be true, then my client will lose his license, which would be detrimental for him because he works as a truck driver. As the trial went on, the witnesses brought forward kept claiming that my client was indeed drunk, which caused the accident to take place. Arguing one witness can be cleverly successful if done right by a lawyer with experience like myself. However, arguing multiple who claim the same story can get tricky. My opponent seemed to have a very easy case on his hands, and I envied him for that. The case was getting to an end, and I could see my client getting more worried about the outcome. I wasn't satisfied neither. All of a sudden one of the witnesses strongly wishes to show one more piece of evidence that will "put the nail in the coffin" and conclude the case. The witness who was brought forward made similar claims as the previous ones. He kept saying "the guy was drunk. I have seen drunk drivers before. He was definitely on something and all that." Then he proceeds to state "and I have the video to prove it." The statement makes my heart jump. I could also see the opposing lawyer suddenly standing up looking worried. He wasn't aware of the video either. The witness proceeds to show the video to court, indeed showing my client arguably tipsy. I could see my client feeling sorry for himself, ready to admit his possible guilt, but I tell him to shut up. Now we have them. This is perfect. I proceed to stand up and object, telling the judge that this evidence was not disclosed before the trial, hence crucial evidence regarding the case was withheld from us with the intention to catch us off guard, which means that my client does not have the chance to a fair trial. Disclosing relevant evidence is a must-do in all lawyers' textbook and usual processes. The judge was extremely dissatisfied to hear such silly mistake coming from the prosecution. As a result of not respecting the legal procedure, the evidence, the video, was not taken into consideration for the final verdict. Sometimes the best way to argue something in court is to pick holes into what the other person is saying or not saying, rather than arguing the facts or the evidence. My client ended up agreeing with the person who accused him to pay the property damage, which amounted to a relatively small amount based on what was damaged. However, the accuser was left with a bill from an incompetent lawyer, which was twice as much as the amount he got back from my client. This was only unfortunate, however fair and well deserved, if you employ someone who doesn't know how to do their job properly. I haven't seen that lawyer since. This is disclosure 101. Maybe he went back to law school. I didn't like at all the situation I was in. You just had to pursue law, didn't you? I said to myself, while nervously trying to make my way through the horrible traffic I was stuck in. But that wasn't the whole situation. It was actually the least horrible part about it. I had a trial that day, one of my first big ones, and I couldn't have been more nervous and anxious about it. The other side was represented by Mike Holland, a well-known and appreciated lawyer all across town. I was honestly afraid about losing my job. But I had to do it, and even if that was going to be my faith, I had to walk towards it with dignity, or at least make the impression of it. Finally arriving, my client was already waiting, but seeing her asking me if I was alright and trying to man me up actually made me feel even worse. Mike was already there. I saw him on the way in, arrogantly smoking his cigar while drinking his expensive coffee fetched by his new assistant for the week. He is known to change assistants almost weekly for the simple reason of not meeting his needs perfectly, the way he likes to put it. Still, the waiting list for getting this job is ridiculously long. Everybody wants to get through his file loops in hope of becoming the next Mike Holland in town, or at least the second best. As the trial started, I felt rushes of adrenaline continuously pumping through my veins, and in a few seconds, I had managed to pull myself together and decided to follow a completely different plan from what I had already prepared. I wasn't sure of it in my head, but my gut was in the right place. And they say the gut never lies for a reason, as I managed to cleverly make up a counter argument for every single one he brought to the table. Mike was getting visibly irritated and started to lose the sense of clear thought. He started to shout and spit out arguments he had already used before, and, even worse, started to break the protocol any lawyer has to obey in court. Finally, I objected one of his stands, and rightfully so, and all of a sudden, he grew silent. He stuttered, trying to find something to say, but he seemed to just be blocked. The judge started asking if he is feeling alright, or if he needs a moment, but from out of nowhere he changed completely, putting on the calm arrogant mask on, saying, "Come on, George, I've known you for so long. Can't you see this lawyer is nothing compared to me? Just finish this already, and let's all get home." A loud crowd gasp was heard across the room as the judge's face kept getting redder and redder from the anger and shame. It was a common thing for lawyers and judges to know each other, but to refer in that manner in the middle of a trial is shameful, outrageous, and clearly an insult. Only after he finished did Mike realize the words that just came out of his mouth. He had managed to get the best of him. The trial was interrupted, Mike was kicked out of the room, and my client won. Mike did not speak again after that, as he very well knew anything more he said could be used against him in court. He was also fired from the firm he represented. Funny to think that now he is going to be the one that fetches coffee, if he even gets that lucky, that he could practice law in the future.